All right, welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. This is we're recording this on a Sunday night because we're trying to get it out as early as possible because it's another major week. We got actually two majors in July because they moved some stuff around, but we're talking the Open Championship, and I'm excited to talk it through with my guys, Pete and Colin. What's going on, fellas?
What's up, guys? Happy to have a nonstop British week right when Wimbledon ends, the Open starts. So it's just like a lot of all things United Kingdom this week. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, right after Brexit as well, and there's no baseball, so they're getting all the attention too from the DFS community.
Yeah, my condolences to all the Open players who receive their prize money in British pounds now. You basically just took a 15% pay cut than when you started from last year, but may you live in interesting times. So, good luck to them.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an exciting week. All-Star break for MLB starts tomorrow, being Monday, and continues through Thursday. MLB starts back up Friday. So this week is all PGA, all the Open. So we'll have a ton of content and obviously this podcast, and we'll have some other stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, we're full on PGA this week, which is very exciting. So let's get right into it. You know, we didn't have a PGA tournament last week. The Greenbrier got canceled because of the flooding in West Virginia. We did have the Scottish Open, but we're not going to spend time going over stuff because this is a major week, and that's just, it's one of the biggest weeks of the year, and we're just going to spend as much time as we can on that. So let's get right into it. Open Championship, the course is at Royal Troon, and we're going to go over that as much as we can. It's a little interesting in that the British Open or the Open Championship, I'm sorry, I won't call it the British Open, is a tournament that rotates courses like the U.S. Open does. It's not like the Masters at Augusta where it's at the same course. So course history is a sort of a divisive topic in how to measure that. And we're going to get into that. But first, Colin, I'll kick to you. Royal Troon in Scotland, what sort of course is it? What are we looking at here?
So this is one of the 3 weeks of the year where I'm kind of going blind on course history. The last time they played Royal Troon in 2004. You could have some applicability, but I found the longer term predictive stuff says don't use anything beyond 5 years. So from a strictly data standpoint, I actually have no idea what kind of course it is. And as much as it pains me, I have to rely on the subjective angles here. So I was hoping that Pete could tell me what kind of course it is. So what do you got for me?
Well, it's 7,200 yards, par 71, only 3 par 5s, and it's a links course, so definitely a premium on accuracy. On the front, there's a lot of these short par 4s where you just kind of have to play target golf. Definitely favors the accurate player. The interesting thing on the back is the par 4s are longer, so could be an advantage. Right now, obviously it's Sunday night when we're recording, but the one thing that doesn't go completely into it's all accuracy, doesn't matter about distances. There's a lot of long par 4s on the back, and if the course is really soft from all the rain, which they're anticipating, that could put a little bit higher premium on the distance as well. But for the most part, it looks like an accuracy thing. I mean, it's your standard Open Championship. There's pot bunkers. People are going to have to scramble. But there have been really good scores here in the past, obviously a lot further back. But if the course plays similar how it did in the past, our winner should be 10 under or more, somewhere in that range, which definitely means more scoring than what we just had like Open.
Fair enough. So Colin, you said that there's really not much course history here. They had the 2004 Open here, but since then they haven't had a tournament at Royal Troon, and it rotates courses. So I guess the question is there anything that we can do to get some sort of course history? I've had some people ask me if there's something we can do, like combine the past Opens, or maybe just combine some European courses that are links courses and see if we can just get some courses that are similar, so we can figure out what sort of guys do better at these European courses, because apparently these link styles are fairly similar. Do you subscribe to that at all, or is it just a week to maybe ignore that?
I actually go back and forth on this. So when I looked at this last for the U.S. Open, we did this a couple of weeks ago, I looked at what happens we combine all U.S. Open courses, just kind of treat it as a U.S. Open course. And that made predictions worse. So on the one hand, I believe that that's probably, you can safely ignore that from that end. But on the other end, I could buy that there's a lot more diversity of course types with the U.S. Open than there are for something like the Open Championship, where it's a lot more link-style courses. I looked into this way back in the development days before we went live here at FantasyLabs to see, like, is there a way to pull in similar courses in terms of like what their key stats are or what their summary stats are? And I didn't have a whole lot of success of finding like data-driven groupings for similar courses. That doesn't mean that I don't believe that like that similarity type stuff exists. I think that Link's style is it's a distinct enough style that you probably could look at things like the comparable courses and maybe get course history from there. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like how that is a whole lot of different than what we have set up for FantasyLabs. Like if Pete tells me it's an accuracy course, I don't think that like we're gonna know down to the 7th decimal point. Like, okay, does that mean I weight driving accuracy 5 in my model or 9 in my model? I think it's just kind of like a feel type of thing. So I believe that kind of like similar course history could exist in theory, but it's very tough to prove that it works reliably, and it's not gonna, I don't think, perform a lot better than just subjective recommendations.
Okay, fair enough.
Sure.
Okay, cool. A couple things before we get into our players, and we're going to break these down in tiers like we normally do. I have some questions for you guys, as I normally do in these podcasts, so I'll throw them to you. Just quick looking at the forecast for the weather. This is Sunday night. It's always tough to look at weather this far in advance, but I do think that it could bring up an interesting couple strategy questions. It looks like it's going to have rain all weekend, and it's going to be a little bit chilly in the 50s, maybe get into the 60s during the day. And Pete, you had mentioned this a little bit before. If it's going to rain, it's going to soften the greens. You know, one thing that Colin had mentioned a couple podcasts ago was that it was, I think it was actually at the U.S. Open, where it's going to be an accuracy course, but a sneaky contrarian play to take distance guys if it's going to be soft, and it's going to play more that way. Is that something that you potentially might subscribe to this week, Colin?
Especially with how cold it is too. Just given what we know about how the ball just goes way shorter and colder and colder temperatures, then, you know, maybe some of these par fours play a little more like par fives if you don't have the distance for it. So yeah, I believe that could be like a sneaky type of play. I don't have like any conclusions or anything like, oh, I went back and looked and yeah, the narrative did hold up. So I'd still agree that isn't incomplete. Like, I'm not going to recommend anything like based on like, sure, it could, but I don't have a solid like thing to go off of other than more like untested hypotheses.
Fair enough. And we're going to have ways to, you know, we'll answer reader questions, and we'll have a show later this week. So we'll definitely circle back to weather. We're not going to get into it a whole lot here because it's just too early, and we definitely want to give the most accurate forecast and analysis on that. But real quick, Pete, is when it's going to be weather like this and potential rain, do you just wait as long as possible to make lineups?
I try to. I mean, the weather's definitely a huge part, and especially if you think there's going to be a big edge to one of the draws, depending on how the weather's exactly going to break, when the rain gets there, when the wind gets there, it definitely can be really impactful. So certainly one of the biggest adjustments you're making is just what the weather is, because you kind of know all the other data, and obviously we're waiting on any late news, but definitely that's the one reason to wait is the weather.
Fair enough. Another question, and I'll kick this right back to you, Pete. You know, we have a major like at Augusta, where, you know, we have a guy like Jordan Spieth. We've talked, especially at the Masters, in our podcast about how Jordan's so familiar with the greens, and that gives him an edge. We have a course at Royal Troon this week where not only do we not really know what the course is, but it hasn't been played at since 2004. So some of these younger guys, and really just the field in general, either haven't played or really don't know that much about this course. I mean, I'm sure they can get data on it, but they haven't had the experience playing. So what does that do for your player analysis this week, Pete? I mean, how do you weigh that in your analysis of players, the fact that they may not know about the course that much?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to give as many bumps. I mean, I think at Augusta you can say, okay, this guy might not have the greatest form coming in right now, might not be the golfer he once was, but you know, has tremendous history here at the course. Like Angel Cabrera, there's a lot of guys that just continue to play well there for whatever reason. Course knowledge, I think, is a big part of it. But, there's a lot of things that we're still trying to figure out, how comfortable a golfer is. Maybe at certain courses, they just know exactly where they want to hit their tee shots, and they know their club selections, and that is really good for them. So there's so many subjective things that you can take, but the one thing that's applicable is you realize, okay, these guys definitely play better at Augusta. And Spieth, I think we've seen now, he's been such a master on the greens that it's someone we just have to bump him up anytime he's at Augusta. So now that we don't have that, and we have a course with very little history, you're not giving any bumps or any subjective, things like that to any of these golfers. So just kind of have to go with more current stats, go with course fit that you believe in, take an angle you believe in, then pick the best golfers based on their price.
Are there guys, and I'm sure there are, this is a more rhetorical question, but I'm curious on maybe some guys you have in mind. Are there guys that are just better adapting to all sort of different, if a course maybe plays softer than usual, or just the fact that they don't know the course? Is there golfers that just have the ability to adapt to whatever situation better more than other players?
Yeah, there's guys who are more consistent. I guess you want to look at it like that. So you can definitely weight that, the guys who have more consistency. But yeah, these guys are all the best in the world. They're world class. They've all played a ton of golf courses in their life, and they know how to handle the elements relative to their game. So just a matter of figuring out the angle you want to take, and again, picking the best golfers. There's definitely some inefficiencies based on the prices, when you're looking at certain statistics. So definitely think there's still a really nice edge, and the majors are always fun. You get a lot more people playing, and should be a great week.
Of course, yeah. And we'll get into some strategy questions probably when we talk about players. Pete and I in the U.S. Open did a Millie Maker strategy podcast. We'll tweet that out again this week. Definitely go listen to that if you're going to play in the Millie Maker. We talked about strategy and how to attack that specific tournament. So definitely go listen to that. Sort of a dumb question, but I think it was just sort of funny after last week. And wanted to ask you guys, traveling overseas for these guys, is that where you at all? We had talked off air, just you guys have played the Euro slate last week. JB Holmes didn't get his clubs because they got messed up in his airline. He didn't get them until I think Thursday morning, right before he was supposed to play. Obviously, we're not predicting that's going to happen again, but does that worry you at all? The fact that it's just in a different place, people are a little less comfortable. We talked to even narratives at other tournaments where guys are close to home, they're a little more comfortable, they can sleep in their own beds. Does that mean anything to you? The fact that it's a major, but it's in a different country?
You can give a slight edge to the Euro guys, maybe, but the nice thing for a lot of these guys is there was an event that got canceled, so people are getting into town early. They're there when they're comfortable. Some people want to get there earlier than others, but because there's no PGA event this week and the only other event was in Scotland, I think travel shouldn't be an issue. But I definitely think you could still give the edge to Euros just because it's links golf and it's temperatures they're used to, and this is what they grew up playing. So if you want to take that angle, I certainly don't have a problem with it. But, the travel is not really applicable this week, I don't think.
So, but the interesting thing that you could make a case in years prior that it was an angle. So I remember there's this guy, Jake Nichols, who now runs 15th Club, the golf intelligence outfit that provides actionable data to a lot of golfers. And he did a study a couple of years ago on if there's a difference between performance of people who played in the Scottish Open and the John Deere Classic, which traditionally is always the week before the Open. They moved it this year to accommodate the Olympic schedule. And they did say that the John Deere guys maybe had half a stroke to a stroke, a little bit worse than the Scottish Open because they're flying over right and they have a little bit of jet lag.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's not happening this year. The John Deere Classic is not. There was no PGA event before this week because it got canceled. So if you do kind of pick up a historical trend of give the edge to the Euros because some of them are traveling, I don't think that will be as big an edge this year. So yeah, I believe you could still hypothetically give it if you went back and look at the data and you calculated how much edge is it. I still think you have to mitigate that this year because there is no PGA event before the Open this year, and there were in years prior. So,
do you think there's any edge there, or people are just not going to pay that much attention?
I think if the John Deere Classic were this week, then yeah, there would have been edge. Or if there were a PGA event this year, there would have been there. But it's just the edges don't weight it, I guess, which is the most underwhelming thing ever.
Right.
I know everybody wants their super sharp angle that like nobody else sees, but sometimes it's the absence of an angle that's the smart play.
Yeah, that's fair. And my last question before we get to players, but this is going to transition us perfect. And we're going to break down players like we do for our majors. Instead of 3 tiers, it's going to be 4 tiers just because it's such an important event. And we'll start with start with the top tier because my question to you guys, and Pete, I'll kick this to you. Dustin Johnson, what in the world do we do with him? Our top tier this week, I'm going to, instead of the big 3, we're going to expand to the big 4 because DJ has earned that. So let's talk these top 4s. We got Day, we got DJ, and Rory and Jordan. DJ has been, I think we could probably agree, the best golfer this year. He's priced as the second highest golfer. Recency bias. I'm curious just, how you're approaching him this week and just your thoughts on him in general as we transition to this top tier of golfers.
Yeah, he's made every cut. He's won his last 2 events. His last 4 events are all top 5s. The guy's just been incredible. He's been an elite golfer for a long time, and now he's turned the corner because he's won a major. He's definitely playing his best golf right now, but he's always been an elite guy, and he shows up in these majors. So it's hard to argue against pretty much any of these top guys, with the exception of maybe Jordan Spieth, who's probably a tier below the rest of these guys. But then there's merit to play him in higher stakes tournaments because he'll be lower owned than those guys in the higher stakes tournaments. And the millionaire maker, the one argument I'd make is maybe fade Dustin Johnson because I feel like he will be super popular. But I think he's. These guys are all so freaking good. And Dustin and Jason Day are clearly the top 2 guys right now. But then Rory's the European. So it's top 4 is super hard to differentiate. I would just go with a guy that you like. I'm really struggling to differentiate them in a big way outside of Spieth, who I think is a guy who I would be, I'm not as bullish on him relative to the other 3, but he probably will have lower ownership in the high stakes tournaments.
Yeah, I think before the WGC event last time I basically said I can't tell Jason Day and Dustin Johnson apart right now. And then Dustin Johnson went out and won the tournament to validate that. So I think the top 4 is basically, all things considered, about properly priced. I'm similarly finding it tough to differentiate between the 2. So I think it comes for GPPs, it comes down to ownership. Like maybe I'd give DJ a little bit of a high. Like if I had to pick one of the 2, I'd probably still go DJ, just because if it is going to be rainy, there's just such that like elite distance that I think it translates a little bit more into DraftKings scoring more than it does from like pure odds to win. Right. But yeah, I think this is like they're kind of all properly priced. It's all ownership. I agree with.
I'm on Rory for what it's worth in the millionaire maker. I'll probably have the most shares.
Yeah, I think that's about the right balance of ownership versus equity.
Okay. So what do you guys think ownership's going to be? Would you say it would be DJ, Day, Rory, Jordan?
Oh, yeah, that sounds about right.
Rory and I don't know. I think Rory and Day will be pretty close, but I think Spieth will be the lowest. But like in something like the millionaire maker, like there's just so many people. Like what I've noticed is like, some guys are just going to always take Spieth. They're always going to take Rory. They're like people have their favorite guys, and they're going to ride that horse. So whenever you think, the ownership might be massively down on a guy, something like the millionaire maker, it just normally doesn't come to fruition. Where it does come into fruition, where game theory and all this stuff is the higher stakes tournaments. So if you're doing any of that, definitely think that Spieth has some additional equity there. But I think Rory overall is the best millionaire maker play.
So one thing I wanted you guys to argue a little bit about, because Pete, I'm curious what your thoughts on whether DJ really, and if you're listening to this podcast as opposed to watching the podcast, when Pete was talking about DJ and he said he turned the corner, Pete did the quotation mark. So Pete, I'm curious whether you think he actually has turned the corner. And Colin, on your end, Mr. Spock here, just data-driven guy, I wonder if you believe if there is such a thing as turning a corner, or if DJ was just always as good and him winning was just a result of variance, and eventually he was going to win just being this good. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on, whether he's actually turned the corner or if that's not meaningful, really.
It's the first one. DJ was going to win a couple majors no matter what. in my opinion. Unless he just ran really, really bad. He's just too good. He puts himself into contention too many times. He has a skill set with the elite driving distance and ability to hit the ball super high. He has all the tools to win a major, and he's an elite golfer. So given enough opportunities, I thought it was inevitable that he'd win a major. A lot of people now are, say, oh, the monkey's off his back. Now let's start pouring in. I think his equity is similar to what it was in the past. I do think he is playing his definitive best golf he's ever played. He obviously has a little additional confidence and swagger, which I think means something in golf. So maybe he's going to play a little bit above expectation relative to what his track would have been without the win. But it's nothing massive. It's not like, oh, he won a major. Now he's going to be a totally different guy. That's kind of what the media makes it out to be, but it's definitely not true in my opinion.
Yeah, and to answer that second part of the question, I absolutely believe that people can turn corners on a dime, and there is a rapid change. Usually, my rule as far as like weighting that is there's no way to tell from results alone when someone has made a sustainable change. You kind of have to rely on supplementary stuff. Like I think the ones we've talked about before are when people switch from belly putters and they have to figure out the new regime. Or it's something like Luke Donald, where he's reverting from trying to add more power to going back to his ball striking form. That requires kind of essentially subjective confirmation. So, like, is there anything about DJ's play that indicates that, like, this new level is sustainable? I don't know. I think we've honestly been, we've been kind of high on him to start. I think he's always been, this good. And I think he's, he's definitely playing better, but is this like that? It doesn't seem too out of whack in terms of like normal results of just weight recent form, and also it's pretty tough to tell the difference between just like weight recent form and he's turned a corner, so now everything's different. So like if you're weighting your time results properly, then like those two should converge to the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. All right, before we move to our next tier, which is going to be just the tier right below them, and maybe this guy that I want to ask you about before we move on, it fits in that tier, like Pete mentioned a second ago, Jordan. Can either of you guys sell me on Jordan, other than the potential low ownership? Is there anything about his game that you guys can sell me on at all?
Just look at his major form. I mean, if you look at every time all his major results are as good as anyone. I mean, that's the sell on Jordan, is that he's better mentally than all these guys, which I can buy that. I think Day is another guy who's really come a long ways mentally and is very, very sharp in that regard. Rory and DJ are just that, the two definitive elite talents. Day's obviously immensely talented too, but the argument for Spieth is that he peaks and he does things mentally so well that he's going to play his best golf in the majors. You look at all his results, you just pull all his major results. I mean, that's the argument for it. But, I still prefer the other guys to him.
Yeah, the only thing that I would maybe like differ on that is like the idea of is it proven that the big guys can like basically optimize their game for the majors? I think
for sure.
Yeah, and I think I'm open to like the idea that they could. I would, before I agree with it, I'd at least just want to run some numbers and say all right, how predictably can the top guys optimize their game around the majors? So yeah, that would be why you would pick them, but I still lean towards it's an.
I'm not saying I believe that angle, just FYI. I'm saying that if you wanted to say why Jordan Spieth, that's the angle. I'm not saying that angle is backed up, but that would be the angle you would take.
Yeah, I agree. That would be the hypothetical angle.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll circle back on these top guys at the very end. All right, let's move down to our next tier, which is going to seem large. The next tier we're going to discuss is everything, all the players just below the big four. So it's going to be the guys that are 10-6 on DraftKings down to 7-6. Again, it seems large. It's a $3,000 tier, but it's actually not that many golfers. It's very spread out. There's a lot of guys who are cheap in the 6K and 5K range, so we're going to just break those up a little bit. So that 3K range, which is going to be Adam Scott down to Pete's boy, Russell Knox. Colin, I'll start with you. Out of those tier guys, which I guess you can consider the tier below the big four, who stands out the most to you?
Number one with a bullet is Bubba Watson, just because I don't understand how he is so cheap at this at this tournament. Yes, I get it. It's an accuracy course. He's not exactly an accuracy guy, but there's just been nothing in his results to suggest that he needs like this dramatic of a drop. No missed putts since February. Like he's like been hovering around like, in the 11K and the 9K or whatever, and just dropped like a rock to 8,000. I think he's clearly the highest value. I think enough people are going to be picking up on that too. So he'll probably be pretty popular. But other than that, I think the one that's like similar, like you could buy the course fit angle too, because that's not priced in here, is Matt Kuchar, who always seems to be just like in the mid tier for the majors. I don't know. Is that like, Pete, do you think Kuchar is one of those cases where like he's reliably good, but will never have like elite upside or whatever? So that's why he has low DK pricing, but will do well on average.
I think that's part of it.
He'll fit that bill, like almost like every single major.
The one interesting thing on Watson right now, like, let me give you some guys. You're going to get better odds. You're getting more money. You're going to get, but right now, Bubba Watson, as we record this, is 77 to 1. Let me name some guys that are lower than him. Matthew Fitzpatrick, 66 to 1. Zach Johnson, 66 to 1. Kuchar, Patrick Reed, Martin Keimer by a large margin. Even scrolling farther down, Graham McDowell now, just based on what I think is a very accurate place to look, is now 66 to 1. So Watson, if you're bullish on him, you can take that. I mean, that's a pretty. I mean, you're getting to win a major, you're getting 77 to 1 with the juice on Bubba Watson. So
yeah, that just seems like a good bet to me. Like that's like, but I don't know. That's when I struggle. What am I missing here? There's nothing to justify that. He feels more like a 50 to 1 or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the marketplace right now. Definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
It's pretty bearish on Bubba, but I get it. I mean, if he was like Bubba's a guy who I'm always going to take at the Masters. We talked about that before. Lefty who hits a big fade, really get up and down around the greens, has great knowledge there. He's won there twice. I mean, all this stuff like makes sense. And he'd never be even remotely priced like this. But this is like the polar opposite, like kind of situation. So I get it. He's not a golfer, but I think this is a really bad spot for Bubba. So it's hard to figure out what to do with him.
So is the premium more on driving accuracy than getting up and down on greens?
I definitely think it's more on the accuracy. They're still scrambling, but I mean, Bubba's just really crafty on the Masters greens. He knows them so well, and there's just it pays dividends to be creative, to really have a lot of shot manipulation around the greens, where I think it still matters here, obviously, but not to the same degree. And I think part of this is just all the subjective stuff's baked into this price too for the market. It's like, oh, Bubba, struggles. He's not as good in Europe. When things go bad for him, they really go bad. When it's bad weather, he'll check out earlier. I mean, all this stuff is probably crap, but that's what's baked into the market price. So I think it's a really interesting angle. I'll definitely have tournament exposure to him, but I will not probably have him in my cash game.
So I'm curious, Colin. I mean, his last 75-week green in regulation is higher than most of these top 4 guys that we just talked about, except for Rory. Rory has a over 70% green.
Would you take Bubba in a cash game over Kuchar or someone like even Jim Furyk?
Honestly, yeah, I'd consider it. I think like Kuchar is, like he's going to make his way into every single cash game lineup. But if I'm paying attention to the newfangled, floor and ceiling and getting some better numbers on that, like he's got like sneaky good floor.
He's a cut maker. Bubba hasn't been missing cuts at all. I think he's
so isn't that what you want in a cash game guy?
Yeah. It goes exactly against the narrative, which is the interesting thing. And that's even a bias in my own mind, clearly, because I was just,
So I think, I think the answer is not only would I take him, but if I want rules that I have set out, I would prefer him to maybe a Patrick Reed or Charles Schwartzel or whatever.
Oh, definitely to those guys. Kuchar is also an elite cut maker and top 10 machine.
Yeah, that's a given. Everybody's kind of on that train. But
Bubba's a sneaky, consistent guy, though. That is really interesting. But the price, it really is baked in. There's a lot of bias against him, and we'll see. That's certainly really interesting to me. Who else do you like in that range, Colin, before I snag up a couple?
I think the only other two guys, if you don't want to buy, like if there is something subjective to Watson, like I think the only guys that meet enough value are probably also Patrick Reed and Charles Schwartzel. Reed doesn't have a Scottish Open results priced in yet, but he did decently well there. And so I think they're the only other guys like the mid. It's basically Kuchar, Watson, Reed, and Schwartzel. Those are the ones that kind of jump out at me and that kind of do week to week, just for those same like consistent cut maker type of performances.
Right. Well, in the top tier, you have all the guys who can make your lineup more contrarian, building a more balanced team with a stud like Scott, even Sergio, who is getting quite a bit of hype. Sergio 10K, I didn't think I'd be as high on, but people are really getting into Sergio with this type at just a premium on accuracy and ball striking. But like he's talented. If you're reading like just golf guys picks, Sergio seems to be a really popular pick, but he seems way overpriced to me.
I agree. Yeah.
But that's going to be the narrative that like all these people are going to talk about. And then if you look at his form, I mean, it's been incredible. If you look at me going back, he got third in the Spanish Open, then he did poorly at Players, 54th, but then he won the Bryan, then two fifth places back to back at the U.S. Open and BMW. So his form is clearly really nice. And for the theoretical course fit, or for the course fit that I think it does make sense. But, Sergio's 10K and Bubba Watson's 8K, all of last year, Bubba Watson was always more expensive than Sergio. So some big price changes here. You can argue the same thing with guys like Rose and Stenson. That's a different way to kind of make your roster. Even a Ricky Fowler would be, theoretically a nice contrarian play. The problem is, people just love Ricky Fowler, so they continue to put him in their team. So yeah, it's not these aren't these guys who haven't had the great where recency bias you think is going to pay dividends for you because people might be getting off some of these guys. It's not going to come to fruition because they're still popular. Guys I do like Shane Lowry, I think is a great tournament play for this kind of spot. I know it doesn't exactly fit the stats, but his upside's really high. He also has more downside than most guys in this tier. But I think he's a really interesting play, especially if you want to take a little bit of the Euro angle, which we talked about being not as important this week. I definitely like Fitzpatrick if you want to go the accuracy angle. He seems expensive at this price, but for tournaments, I think he's interesting. Definitely a really good accuracy guy, but definitely not the caliber of golfer of these other players. But the market really does like him.
I'll let you finish, but I actually hate that pick a lot.
I knew you were going to hate that pick. I knew you were going to hate Fitzpatrick. I told you I was long Fitzpatrick a little bit earlier, and he burned me. I shouldn't like him at all. But I would say this: he is way too expensive for the quality of golfer he is. But for this course fit, I think he's a decent play.
Admittedly, I don't have course fit priced in here, so like you can say, but like
he's like one of the worst values, right?
Yeah, I don't believe that the course fit can be that pristine to justify that price.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. And again, this is Sunday night. Maybe I should be off him. One other guy who's going to be an interesting pick is Lee Westwood, who did I don't know if he won this or tied. He didn't win, but he was right there in 2004.
He was like fourth, I think.
Yeah. He's been ridiculous in these majors. Like that's like the only place he seems to show up. I mean, he completely fell apart on 80 at the U.S. Open, but he was right there at the Masters, second place, and he was right there in the U.S. Open as history here. I won't be buying him, but I think a lot of people will based on that data. And the one guy I love, Fitzpatrick, I admit, bad take there. But Russell Knox, I'm not backing off my boy Russell Knox, especially on an accuracy course. I'm all about Russell Knox.
Yeah, I think so. We talked about Knox last week, and I think the consensus is you like him a lot better than I do. And we kind of hypothesized, why am I down on him so much? Like, is there, you could find comparable ball strikers if you want to put a premium in accuracy and all that. I'm just looking at his recent, let's take a look at like his month of June.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
23 and his 70, and like.
He had a good Scottish Open though.
Yeah, so that was it was pretty good last week. How much of that, like you could even, like if you actually believe in home field advantage, maybe even discount that. But then again, like it's the Open, so maybe he still has.
I'm just biased towards him. I played him at like RBC Heritage, he got second. I played him at the U.S. Open, he was nice for me. I mean, I'm a sucker for this guy.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe
personal bias.
Maybe I need to flog some bias out of you. It's like, every time I picked him, he wins.
Yeah, no, basically that's like. been the reality. Matsuyama, I think people will think is too cheap too, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think Matsuyama actually has fallen off of a decent cliff like in a while, so I think that's fine.
Those two cuts were bad. Missing the cut around the U.S. Open.
Yeah, and 42nd at Bridgestone in a 60-person field is just like it's a cliff for sure.
That's some bad results.
Yep.
All right, Colin, you made me. I agree. Most of my bad take on Fitzpatrick. Although I do see, it wouldn't shock me if he did well, but that's a cop out. So I'm not.
It is. No, it's a bad pick. I'm not strength.
Bad pick. All right. No one else I really want to talk about. I think Lowry's nice upside. I do like Russell Knox, though. We can disagree on that one. I think that Bubba's definitely interesting, and I think Kuchar's basically he's close to a lock. He's a great play.
Yep.
There's probably some noise to this, Pete, but I'm curious. Lowry has not been good in the last year on par fours, and this is just more setting me up to ask the question. This course does have a lot of par fours, and they have some long par fours. I'm curious if that sort of affects. We've talked. This is an accuracy course, but some of these holes are a little tough and long, especially the par fours and potential. These guys with distance to have a leg up on the field and get some birdies there. Is that?
It doesn't. Lowry's like fine. He's not like super long, but he's long. He's long enough, and his accuracy is not like super great, but it's accurate. Like he seems like he should just be like more of like a. He should. I don't know. I'm not saying he should be steady exactly, but he doesn't seem like he have this wide, a massive amount of variance. But if you look at his results, like he's missing cuts at places he shouldn't, but then he's also, tied for second at the U.S. Open and competing in the, big spots. So he's definitely a guy who won't be in my cash games, but certainly someone I'll have in tournaments.
Maybe my bigger question here, and Colin, you can chime in on this, is sometimes the overall course distance a little misleading, like just how it distributes between the 3, 4s, and 5s, as far as the par 3s, 4s, and 5s, that you could have a really short par 3 or a really, short par 5s, but really long par 4s, and it seems like it's an accuracy course, but maybe it skews a little more distance than we think just by looking overall.
That's such a good question, and I wish I had like even halfway close to a good answer for you. Like I absolutely believe in that hypothetically. We're like, yes, the more granular thing is to measure hole by hole. Like distance per par 3, distance per par 4 is probably better than overall yardage. It is something that I've looked at exactly 0 so far. Because the way that course fit works out is like you just roll them all up and say, how do you do like on the course overall? And that should get you to the same spot as if you did it hole by hole. So I definitely believe it. Normally I just bypass that when I do course fit, but I don't have course fit this week. So it's a even better question now. And you've been wonderfully unprepared with such a good question.
Pete's on mute, but trying to talk right now.
All right, I didn't give enough credit to Jim Furyk. I wanted to talk about him more. I like Jim Furyk, Kuchar. I like that high 7K range. I'm buying Furyk, man. I think he's kind of bad. I think he's the kind of guy you want.
So I have Furyk. I think so. Furyk isn't that great for me right now, and I played him a ton last year when he was kind of in the middle of swinging things. And I think like I'm open to that being an artifact of, all right, he's had a long layover, something that his results are just like, there's just not a whole lot to go off of in a year span because of that injury.
Yep.
But even still, like, I mean, his last month or whatever, it was still not the same as his month that he was having before the injury.
Prediction here, Sahil will have him. Sahil's the big high volume guy. Not saying that that's right by any means, but I predict that Sahil will have Jim Furyk on his team.
That's a better side bet.
I feel like that's like almost a lock. Like I feel like I don't know if he'll listen to this, but even if he does, I don't think he'll change his mind. I think he's a lock to have some Furyk action.
Yeah, I think Furyk is the kind of guy where like you have like that's a better player to probably evaluate subjectively. Is he back or not? Yes or no?
Seems back to me. That's why I think he's fine. I'm not saying I'm going to go all in on him, but I think he's definitely in cash game consideration.
Yeah, I can't get there, but that's because, I don't watch the games.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get it.
Okay, let's move to our third tier out of 4 tiers. This is going to be 7-6. 7-5, I'm sorry, to down to 6-5. So it's going to be Graham McDowell, all the way down to 6'4". So it's right at these Kevin Na, JB Holmes, Grillo, and then our favorite Keegan Bradley will end that tier. And then we'll have the bottom value tiers to go over. Who's starting this one?
I think I get the nod. I'll take Grillo right off the bat, like him. That's a lock. We're all gonna like if we're taking the accuracy angle.
Mm-hmm.
I like Cabrera Bello. I think he's for cash games. I mean, this guy, talk about a cup maker. This guy's doing it. So I like him quite a bit. There's some guys that Graham McDowell's lines moved a lot. I probably won't be on him at all. I think Colin's gonna laugh at that as a terrible pick. Obviously, you'll need the Scottish Open results, where he did play well, but I don't know. He's going to be a polarizing pick for me. Billy Horschel seems cheap just looking at him. I think he's a better golfer than at $6,800 price. You could say the same thing about Kevin Chappell. There's a lot of guys in this range. John Rahm, if you're buying young talent, I definitely don't mind that at all. We'll have some exposure to him in tournaments. Have to decide how I'm going to use him otherwise. There's a lot of guys in this tier that are really intriguing and certainly makes it viable to get in the big four, especially if you like a lot of guys in this tier.
So who's the guy that I'm going to hate again? Graham McDowell, is that here? I hate that.
You don't like McDowell, right?
Yeah, I definitely hate that pick. That's just like,
he's a decent Scottish. I don't think he's a good pick. His line's just moved a lot so far.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the call. I guess that is a decent segue into the article because I wrote that last week. So for those of you that didn't read it, my big hot take this week was that line movement may be the most it may be overrated in PGA DFS, or at least standard open to close line movement as we know it, kind of the simple version. Long story short is I looked for like proof that line movement does predict like basically over or underachieving like opening odds type expectations, and I can't find it using your simple definition. So I'm bearish on line movement. I'm more bearish on line movement more than you are now, until I can figure out like, okay, are there different types of line movement that can actually predict success? I believe that they're possibly out there, but you definitely I need something to prove like a little bit more concretely, like this is the type of line movement that is good, whereas like instead of your garden variety. So if McDowell's just a pure line movement play, then as of now I don't believe in line movement, so it's definitely not a play for me. Pete, I wanted to do you want to get an award in on line movement, just because I know you probably still incorporated it, so I wanted to give you a chance to
right. I appreciate what so every time you do a study, I'm going to give that a lot of weight. I want my decisions to be data driven, and my PGA process relative to every other DFS sport I play has the least amount of data, especially before FantasyLabs. And now I've incorporated a lot more, and I'm still trying to look at stuff and incorporate some strokes gained stuff where I think it's applicable. And I'm trying to find different angles like everyone else who's playing PGA DFS. But line movement has been something I've had a lot of conviction on in the past, and certainly changed it a bit, but I still have the same conviction on these huge moves. I talked about John Rahm earlier. That's the one I think was a really big miss, where I think it was just so evident after the U.S. Open at the Quicken Loans, where he jumped just an incredible amount, and literally every single sharp was on him. And he had a great round. I mean, I still believe in that, and especially for some maybe even on these young guys. There's a lot of ways I'm sure you could slice it and dice it to make it work in your favor, but there's certain circumstances I definitely give a lot of merit to the big line moves. And we were talking a little bit pre-show. I think the study you did could be skewed based just on the top guys, especially if you're looking at line moves that are 1% or more. Almost always that's just going to be the top guys, and I think that's really just going to play into short-term recency bias for people, the public especially, is investing dollars in the guys that have done well recently, and that's probably not predictive, especially for those top guys. So I can see why the numbers played out that way. I still have the same conviction or similar conviction on certain aspects, but I'm definitely going to be more tentative and careful at selecting line movements that I think are impactful.
Yeah, and I think I even said in the article, and I was listing all the reasons why my study could be wrong, and one of the first ones is not all line movement could be created equal. I believe that a 1% change in equity from a bottom guy could be different than a 1% change to a top guy.
Oh, it's massive.
Yeah. So the only reason that, I'd be hesitant to pull the trigger on there is like, okay, you can go back and prove that now. But now you're like, the more finely you slice and dice like in that data, like your sample size goes down. So that just requires like, it's my version of a cop out is, well, I need more data. No one likes to hear that, but I believe
that's the right answer. That's not a cop out. That's just reality. Like, and that's the thing. We're dealing with an incomplete data set in golf in a lot of regards, and it's really noisy because of the way the game is. And we have smaller amounts of data because they're not playing as often as other sports. So it all makes sense, and that's why it's a great game. It's a lot of fun for people, and you can convince yourself on a lot of angles. And Colin, you're right on a lot of things. Hopefully, I'm right on some things, and there's a lot of things that we're all clearly wrong on that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah. So again, like this is to reemphasize to the listeners, it's always a work in progress. I welcome times where, Pete can tell me where I might be missing something.
Other than Matthew Fitzpatrick being a good play, we're clearly vetoing that, and I'm trying really hard for the reverse jinx right now. Like, really.
Yeah, like no,
keep trying so hard.
Like I'm fine with my.
I'm gonna have him on some millionaire.
It's gonna be bad. You're not pushing on that one. All right, back to these. Like, all right, maybe we should actually talk about players, but that was a good tangent on line movement. All right. In this range, at the top of the leaderboard, as he always is every week, is JB Holmes. And I feel like at my 30 seconds on him, like, why is he always here? What have I been missing this week?
How much money are you going to burn with this guy?
I don't know. So, I'm struggling. Okay, so let's talk about, why am I, what am I missing on him? So last week at the Scottish Open, he was missing his clubs, right? I didn't know that. I absolutely believe, that could be a thing. But even by kind of traditional inconsistency metrics, I don't know. Maybe I'm just waiting. Maybe something about him has changed.
If you invested in him before, though, Colin, you'd be crushing. And you were still on him, but we just got really high on him, and then he just missed 2 cuts in that stretch. So it's recency bias for us. Look at his results; they're still really good.
Yeah.
If you're investing in him starting in April, you did really well with this guy. Even farther back, 4th at the Masters, 13th at Valero. 53rd, obviously, is bad at Wells Fargo, and he gets into this bad stretch. But even before that, he had 11th at the Northern Trust, 11th at Pebble Beach. So it's not like he's been bad this season.
It's not even like he's boom or bust either. He has a pretty solid floor. I don't know. It's just it's maybe it's superstitious. I always.
He burned us at the Players in the U.S. Open. Those are 2 big investment days.
Yeah, maybe that's just a high leverage burn and it's high profile, so you remember it more. But exactly. I don't know. I can't seem to I can tinker with weights all I want, but I can't seem to shake him. So I guess I'll just introduce him with a Stanford caveat of JB Holmes is always going to be a Colin play or whatever. Take it with whatever grain of salt you want. So, and I totally believe in that warning label. Outside of him, who else did I got? Horschel, I also agree, is pretty cheap.
He looks really undervalued.
Not even undervalued, but I'm increasingly on him because as a consistent cut maker and cash game play for how cheap he is. I could absolutely believe that. Jon Rahm, for the record, I know. So normally I am bearish on all the young people, I was with Bryson, but Jon Rahm is still popping higher than all the other young.
He's really, really good.
Yeah, I'm probably still not going to pick him because I still think his sample size is so small. And I think this is probably going to be my next article about what can sample size tell us in generally about golfers. What do you do with people coming out of the gate strong?
Do you have his amateur results in any of your stuff? Do you have any of those?
No.
Yeah. So I think if you incorporated his amateur results, I think we could even get more behind this guy, honestly. He was the number 1 in the world. There's some big things to look at with him that make me more bullish than other guys. Bryson obviously is unique and it was exciting to get behind him, but if you're just looking at the data, I think this guy's pretty damn legit. Especially
I believe that 100% though. The only reason that I've kind of learned to still avoid all the small sample guys just because I've been there have been enough times where I had Austin Cook as the 38th player in the world, and I just know that that's wrong. And sure enough, they all regress over time. So again, my assumption is they will all regress until I have really good reason to believe otherwise. But so far, they all regress. Anyway, I believe with Chappell as kind of being a little bit undervalued. Kevin, did we talk about Kevin Na? I forget.
That's a great cash game play. I was
kind of him.
100%. When he's this cheap, it's just you're just getting free equity right there for cut making.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like Griot's there for sure. Yeah, I think like that. I think we're in broad agreement. Other than McDowell, who if you believe is a line movement play.
I'm off McDowell.
Yeah,
I'm off
yep.
McDowell for sure. More. I still like Fitzpatrick more than I like McDowell, just for the record. But I'm off Fitzpatrick
Bill
too.
just threw up in my mouth a little bit. That's just terrible. Yeah, I think I mean, again, I'm kind of. I mean, my slant is towards cut makers and all of that. The only other guy that I could see like sneaking in there is Webb Simpson, who still has had his like I think he had like maybe one misstep or two recently, but he has done like his recent form. I think is still pretty good. Yeah, it's a volatile missed form. It's like 2 miscuts and 3 top 11s, so that averages out to something nice. And if you want to go the course fit angle, like yeah, it's probably not like the highest accuracy in the world, but I don't know. It is a play. I'm not like gaga over it, but it's a play.
One other guy I should just mention, and just real quick, I just ran some numbers on some guys, just strictly based on price and current Pinnacle odds as of Sunday, just outright to win. Danny Lee is by far the number one guy right now. He's 81-1, which is better than like Russell Knox, Cabrera Bello, Furyk, Casey, Leishman, all these guys, and he's 6,300. So as of Sunday night, that's one that just is.
Hey, is he in this price tier? Like, hang on. Like, I didn't referee Bryan.
Referee, fine, 6,300. Damn it.
Where are the brackets? Where do you say the brackets are?
It's 64.
Gosh, all right, I'm done. Hand it over to Colin again. He's doing the next.
Yeah, 2 minutes for jumping the gun. Like, can we just do an around the horn thing?
Yeah.
I'm booted right off the bat on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, you duffed that one so hard.
He just showed up at the top of this little spreadsheet I just made, and I felt so smart. And now
I do have silencing power here. Yeah, I could just silence Pete for a couple minutes.
I'm done.
But one guy I do want to ask you about, sometimes in these pods, I always just try to guess before the pods who you guys are going to mention. And here's one guy in this tier that I thought you would. Molinari. Are you just not interested in him at all?
He's been good to me.
He's been crushing on Euro Tour lately. He seems to fit what we want in a golfer this week.
So
He's to have a good price. I mean,
I just don't think it's a good. I think there are better guys at cheaper.
He doesn't make as many birdies. I was looking at birdie rates is what kind of got me off him, and then right after I did that, he went on a tier of 34th, 8th, and 2nd, which has just been tilting. But yeah.
No, I mean, like, he's still, like, I've been high on him before. I just think that he's a little bit too expensive. I think there are multiple guys in the mid-sixes that are just, like, I think they're going to be better than him.
Okay. All right. Sounds
real
good.
Quick, I'll pull it up real quick. I almost have it here, just where he rates in terms of birdies. Gosh. He's down there. We can move on to the next tier. I'll let Colin take it, and then I'll come back with the Molinari stat.
Okay. So our last tier here is going to be just the pure value tier. There's a ton of golfers here, but it's just going to be 6-3 on DK and under. So it's going to include Danny Lee, as Pete just mentioned, so we can go back to that. Smiley is just right below this. Dirt McGirt, who's been playing well recently, especially in the last major. So, yeah, Colin, take it away. Everything under that.
It's my standard murderer's row of value plays here. Brendan Steele at 6,100 is just super cheap. Gary Woodland, who seems to be making more and more appearances in the value tier, and Harris English, who, like, yeah, they're cheap, they're good, they're normally hovering around the 7K range, then they keep putting up good results, and their price doesn't go up. So I probably like them all the most. If you want to go super value, the guy that jumps, if you want to go like super hop heavy, is Patton Kizzire, who is at 5,400, and I would be hard pressed to find anyone else at 5,400 that even comes close to that, because it's all like everyone else at 5,400 is basically everybody on the senior tour or whatever, or like Euro randos that seem to get let in. And so why is Patton so cheap? So like it's been a volatile, past couple months or so. There's like Sawgrass is a crappy result, 2 missed cuts. Like he hasn't put anything like super great up there. But like in terms of long-term adjusted round, I still think he's just better than 5,400. And if you believe in that, then it's still a decent flyer. I mean, it's not terrible accuracy either. So like GRR right now of 68 in player models, I could see like at worst a neutral course fit, if not a pretty good one. Yeah, he's my number one choice if you want to go super cheap.
Like all those plays. real quick on Molinari, he's 112th in just weighted birdie average on the year. Something I'm definitely looking at more just in general is just really trying to figure out just the number of birdies and rounds and all that stuff, and trying to really evaluate that, especially when it comes to some coin flip guys, because I do think it's something good to keep in mind. JB Holmes, by the way, your boy, Colin, he is 6th in weighted birdie average on the entire tour, behind the likes of Spieth, Rory, DJ, Day, and Matsuyama. So
I just don't know how to quit him.
That's just validation to your call there.
Yep.
JB very high on the birdie metric rating. You kind of named all the guys I think are intriguing. I really think Gary Woodland's underpriced, and if the course does play really wet and soft, you can take advantage with him with his length. I talked about Danny Lee there for a little bit. One guy who's really come down, who you would have told me his price was going to be $6,300 at a major a month ago or a month and a half ago, I would have said I'd be all in regardless. That's Charlie Hoffman.
Yeah.
I had a great course fit for him from kind of what the angle I want to take. Guy normally has a bigger distance player, but if you want to take a guy who has good major performances and definitely a guy who can compete in these majors, I don't hate that play given his price, but definitely not a great course fit. Then there's other guys, like there's flyers, like tournaments. I'm surprised you didn't mention him at all, Colin, just for his price. Awful course fit, in my opinion, but Tony Finau, if you want to play that way.
And Hoffman are right below the other two guys, so yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured it would be kind of your guys. I really like Brendan Steele. I think he's a great play. I have no problem with even someone like, if you scroll a little bit farther down, like, we want to take a flyer on someone like Vijay Singh. I don't hate it. Honestly, I know that's going to make you kind of throw up in your mouth, Colin, but he's been playing well lately in like a links course. I don't know. These are flyers for me. I think the clear-cut values of the guys you mentioned. I really like Brendan Steele. And then the rest of these guys are just kind of throwing darts. Same thing with Ryan Palmer at 6,100. I think he's definitely better than BJ. But for tournaments, I think he makes sense, especially if you're going to take the distance is going to matter because the course is so wet angle.
Yep, our value sheets look pretty much.
How's BJ rating on you? Because he's one guy I made sure to talk about. He's been playing a lot better. Like, he was awful. Like, there's a stretch he missed like 3 cuts in a row, and then all of a sudden he started making some cuts, and then he had that second. Obviously, he's old. He's playing on the Open Championship now, or he's not the Open. He's playing on the Senior Tour in some events. But is he rating it all for you, or is he just still piss poor because of those bad cuts?
No, he's not piss poor. He's just like he's up there for sure. Interesting enough for VJ, I keep forgetting. I have to manually apply the aging curve I have under the hood for him here because it treats anybody that's still playing on the main tour over 50 as an outlier. Like, nobody's going to be playing over 50, and then he keeps having to knock him down.
To be fair, not to name drop, but my one golf related cool story when I played poker with Tiger Woods, he did say the only people in the gym when he first got on tour were him and Vijay Singh. And he respects his work ethic. He mentioned BJ and Jim Furyk as the guys who are just like total grinders. So it's not shocking to me that BJ is still in good shape and heading it well up there.
I think talking about the aging curve, I don't think we ever talked about aging curves or anything like that before. It's definitely a thing. We'll get to it later. But if there's anybody that would break the aging curve, it's going to be someone like BJ who, like, if he takes the Julio Franco approach and just takes immaculate care of his body until he's 78 or something. Yeah, I believe that this one-size-fits-all aging curve would not apply to VJ.
Great Franco reference. Loved him with Atlanta. He's still playing baseball in Mexico, and he's definitely in his 50s now.
I hope so. I hope he never stops. Julio Franco will stop playing when Bobby Bonilla stops getting a check from the Mets too.
That's hilarious. I'm looking at he was still in the major leagues at 49, right? He's 57 now. I bet you he's playing. He's got to be playing somewhere. Yeah. Still playing baseball in Japan at 57 years old. This was written in September of 2000.
Oh, my gosh.
57.
That's outrageous.
That's amazing.
He had a grand slam on, let's see here. Now I'm just going down. Oldest hit a grand slam. 46 years old hits a grand slam.
I can't tell if this is a new high or a new low for our team.
I don't know, but it's fantastic.
I was not expecting a Julio Franco discussion when I started this, but it just the moment seized. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get us back on track here. I am curious, Colin, you had mentioned Brendan Steele. Pete, I think you would agree that he's a good play. I'm curious how good of a play relative to the field you guys think he is, because working on my model and just the way that he fits and his price, it seems to me that he might be the most mispriced golfer by DraftKings in this field. You guys think that you guys agree with that at all, or do you think that he's just sort of an okay play at this price range?
I mean, yes, but I feel like he's mispriced every week, so that's just kind of like, I mean, he's second to JB Holmes in terms of like people that will always pop. So I'm probably the unreliable narrator here. So I don't know. Maybe why don't you give him more?
I mean, I like Brendan Steele too. The guy's done well. I mean, some of these guys, Colin, like some of your plays, some of the guys that have gotten on the bandwagon with you, like JB, haven't paid dividends recently, but some of them have just been amazing. So I have like bias from believing what you're saying, which I think is a good thing, obviously. But then, I get it. You get into these golfers. That's the other thing. Like all these guys, if you're watching a lot, like you definitely have biases towards guys you like, and Steele's one of the guys I like. So it's hard for me to debate that. I mean, I think he's a great play. I think he's a fantastic play. He was I think he was on both my Thunderdome big scores this year, Steele. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how can I not like the guy?
I'm glad he makes your Thunderdome Hall of Fame. That's the all-important, like, all right, he's on the wall somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So a question I usually don't ask, and I'm just curious, and maybe there's not a guy you can think about, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there any golfer that you really just dislike this week for whatever reason, whether it's ownership or you just think that he's in bad recent form, or just a guy that's almost a total fade for you?
Total fade for me. Wow, that's a tough one. I haven't thought about who's a total. A guy like Justin Thomas, I probably won't have and watch him go out and win. He's obviously has some really nice upside, but if I'm going to play the accuracy angle, I probably won't have him. But even saying that, that's the thing. I've learned to like a lot of these guys, and no one is just like screaming a guy I can't justify for a tournament, because some of these guys that are overpriced actually end up making really nice leverage tournament plays. So there's definitely a ton of guys I can name that I wouldn't have in cash, but it's tough. There's not someone that I'll just completely fade just off the top of the bat, other than
Keegan.
Yeah, well, you can go down to the bottom of the list and start looking at some of these guys who are just absolutely garbage golfers. Like I don't even know who Rod Pampling is, but he's pretty fun. Guy's not ending up on any of my teams.
Rod, I got to read an answer. All right, so it's a good question. Here's my case. Here's my real fade here, Danny Willett, which pains me because I was early on his bandwagon and a lot, both like the futures markets and the DraftKings stuff. So, back-to-back miscuts in the Euro for the last two. So that's just like a case of death in terms of like what his form is. B, won a major this year, so people who aren't paying attention will probably still just pick him. And C, you'll probably have – he's British, so you'll have some sort of convoluted like Euro home field advantage type of thing. I think his recent form is just like tanked far enough that like he's clear fade to me for all reasons, both from ownership and from like actual projected performance. So he checks all the boxes more than anybody else for me.
That's fair. I think that's a good fade.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we can wrap it up there. We're going to have a lot of content this week, and we'll have some more stuff, shows and reader questions and all sort of stuff that we'll communicate definitely in the next couple of days. But we'll end it. No, I guess we'll wait to make predictions on who's going to win. That's fair, right?
Yeah, we'll wait for the live one for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll end it there. Colin, Pete, thanks, guys. Definitely look out for our content this week. Pete's going to have his video, and we'll have a bunch of stuff as promised. So we'll talk to you guys in a couple days.